The favor comes in around 9 p.m. on a Tuesday. Not urgent, not even that big. Someone needs a ride to the airport at 6 a.m., or help moving a couch, or 20 minutes to just vent for a second. And before your brain has even finished reading the message, your thumbs are already typing yes. Not, let me check. Not, can I get back to you? Just yes, sent so fast it barely counted as a decision. 3 days later, you send a message of your own. Something small. Hey, could you help me with something this weekend? And you watch it sit there, delivered, read. No typing bubble. You tell yourself they're probably busy. You do not let yourself finish the other sentence. The one that goes, they weren't too busy for their thing. This is what it actually looks like when you keep attracting friends who take more than they give. It's not one dramatic betrayal. It's a pattern built out of 100 small yeses and a handful of unanswered small asks, repeated so often it starts to feel like the normal shape of your relationships. And the strange part is, you're usually the reliable one. The one who remembers what people said 3 weeks ago. The one who shows up early to help someone pack. The one whose name people use when they need something done right. From the outside, that looks like generosity. From the inside, it can start to feel like a job you never applied for but somehow can't quit. Here's the part almost nobody says out loud. This isn't only about being too nice. Niceness is simple. This is something more specific. You've quietly turned being useful into the way you earn a place in someone's life. Not because you're weak or naive or bad at picking people. Because somewhere along the way, being needed started to feel safer than being wanted. Wanted is uncertain. Wanted depends on someone else's feelings, which you can't control and can't verify. Needed is different. Needed, you can prove. You can point to it. You drove them to the airport. You listened for 2 hours. You remembered the thing. Being needed comes with receipts. Being wanted doesn't come with anything except trust. And trust is the one thing this pattern is quietly trying to avoid having to rely on. So look at what actually happens in a normal week. A friend texts, upset about work, and you clear your evening without being asked to. You're good at this. You ask the right follow-up questions. You don't rush them. Afterward, they feel better. And you feel something too, useful, needed, slightly relieved. Like you passed a test you didn't know you were taking. Then, a few weeks later, you're the one having the hard week. And you don't send that same message. You tell yourself it's because you don't want to be a burden. But watch the sentence closely. I don't want to be a burden is doing a lot of quiet work. It's not really about protecting them. It's about avoiding the moment where you ask for something. And find out what happens if they say no, or say nothing, or say maybe tomorrow, in a tone that tells you tomorrow isn't coming. So instead, you don't ask. You wait to see if they notice. Half the time, they don't. And instead of naming that disappointment, you file it away as evidence that you were right not to ask in the first place. The pattern proves itself using the exact behavior that created it. This is the loop most people miss because it doesn't look like weakness. It looks like strength. Reliability looks like a virtue. Nobody accuses the person who always shows up of having a problem. But watch what the reliability is actually doing. It's buying you a role. As long as you're useful, you get to stay close without ever risking the harder question of whether you'd be wanted for nothing at all. And the friends who take more than they give aren't usually cruel people twirling a mustache, calculating how much they can extract. Most of the time, they're just people who were handed an arrangement that worked for them and never had a reason to look at it twice. If you always answer, why would they ever wonder whether you're tired of always being the one who answers? You never gave them the information. You gave them the behavior instead, and the behavior said, this is fine, even on the nights it wasn't. Here's a moment that shows this clearer than any explanation could. You're at dinner with a friend who spends 40 minutes describing a conflict with their sibling. You listen well, you ask good questions. Near the end, they exhale and say, God, thank you, I needed this. And there's a warm half second where you feel genuinely good, genuinely close to them. Then the check comes, they glance at their phone, they say, oh, I have somewhere to be, and the conversation folds shut. You realize, walking to your car, that they never once asked what's going on with you, not because they're heartless, because you never gave them the opening. You didn't bring it up either. You told yourself it wasn't the moment. It's rarely the moment. That's the tell. Somewhere in there is a quiet piece of self-deception worth naming honestly. You tell yourself you don't bring up your own stuff because you don't want to make things about you. It sounds humble, it sounds considerate, but underneath, it can also be a way of avoiding the test. The test where you find out whether someone actually wants to know you or only wants you to know them. This is where the misconception needs correcting, because it gets repeated constantly online in a way that isn't quite true. The common version says, you attract these friendships because you have low self-worth. Full stop, end of story. That explanation is too neat, and it quietly blames you for something that isn't really about worth at all. It's usually about function. You didn't build these friendships around whether you deserved love. You built them around a job description. The one who helps, the one who listens, the one who doesn't ask for much. And then you kept getting hired for that exact role by people who never needed to look past it. The cost of that arrangement doesn't show up right away. Short term, it works. You get closeness. You get to feel needed, which, for a while, is close enough to feeling loved that the difference doesn't seem important. But slowly, something else builds underneath it, something quieter than anger. A low, constant sense of being unseen even while surrounded by people. You know their stress levels, their family history, their coffee order. They know your competence, not your Tuesday nights, not what you're actually carrying. The friendship is full of information going one direction. And here's the part that costs the most. The part people rarely say plainly. This pattern doesn't just attract people who take. It quietly filters out the people who would have given back. Someone who wants an equal friendship, who checks in without being asked, who notices when you go quiet. That person often backs off, not out of disinterest, but because you never left room for it. You had the role of fine so firmly held that offering you help felt almost intrusive. The generous ones don't get pushed away loudly. They just stop being needed because you never let them be. So the resentment builds in a strange, sideways way. Not toward any one person, exactly. More like a background hum. You notice you're tired in a way rest doesn't fix. You notice you're annoyed at someone for not asking how you are, right after you spent 20 minutes not telling them. You catch yourself keeping score in your head, silently, the way you'd never say out loud. Because saying it out loud would mean admitting you wanted something back, and wanting something back has started to feel almost embarrassing, like it exposes a need you'd rather not have. That's the real contradiction underneath all of it. You want closeness that isn't earned through usefulness. And at the exact same time, usefulness is the only version of closeness that has ever felt safe to trust. So you keep offering the one thing you know how to give, and quietly wishing someone would offer it back without being asked, while never actually asking, because asking would mean finding out the answer. There's an honest, slightly uncomfortable insight worth sitting with here. The friends who take more than they give aren't the whole problem. The bigger problem is that you've made it very hard for anyone to give to you, because giving to you requires noticing something you never show them. A person who wants to check on you has to actually see that you need checking on. If your default is, I'm fine, don't worry, I've got it, most people will believe you, not because they don't care, because you're a convincing narrator of your own okayness. So what would it look like to notice this differently, without turning it into some big overhaul of your whole personality? It's smaller than that. It's noticing the exact moment before the yes, the half second where the request lands, and your thumbs move before your feelings do. Just noticing that gap is enough to start. Not to always say no, just to feel the automatic reflex once, on purpose, before letting it run. It's also noticing the sentence you use to talk yourself out of asking for something. I don't want to bother them. It's not a big deal. They're probably busy. Those sentences aren't lies exactly. They're just doing more work than they claim to be doing. Underneath them is usually a smaller, harder sentence. I'm not sure they'd say yes, and I'd rather not find out. And it's worth saying, honestly, some of the people in your life will meet you differently the moment you start showing up as something other than useful. Some won't. That second group isn't a verdict on you. It's information you were avoiding. And information, even disappointing information, is still better than the quiet unknowing you've been living in. This isn't a call to keep score, or to stop being generous, or to turn every friendship into an audit. It's smaller and more honest than that. It's letting people see the version of you that sometimes needs something too, and letting the friendship survive that, or not, on its own terms, instead of deciding for everyone in advance that it's safer if they never find out. Go back to that message from the beginning, the one you sent that just sat there, read, unanswered. For a long time, that silence probably felt like proof you shouldn't have asked. But it might be something else entirely. It might be the first honest question you've asked a friendship in a long time. The first moment you let someone see you needing something instead of providing it. What they do with that isn't fully in your control. Whether you keep asking, though, is. This isn't therapy, and it isn't a diagnosis of you or anyone in your life. Just a pattern worth noticing a little more clearly the next time the phone lights up and your thumbs move faster than your feelings do,